The Gulf Intelligence Daily webinar for this week. It's my pleasure to welcome today our speakers, Dr. Charles Elinas. He is the CEO of Cyprus Natural Hydrocarbons Company. Omar Najia, regular speaker on Mondays. He's the global head of derivatives with BB Energy. And Randall Mohammed, former VP Energy Solutions at Ahad Solutions International. So after hitting 7-week highs last week, crude came under downward pressure on Friday and has opened Monday's session in Asia in a very similar frame, quite under pressure. The US Federal Reserve's policy meeting is scheduled for Tuesday and Wednesday this week, and that seems to be squarely the focus for the financial markets starting today. Nervous anticipation in the market, of course, with regard to the Fed's tapering plan. I think that's quite evident. And the broader risk appetite seems to be wobbling again. So Brent and WTI futures have surrendered some of their gains of last week, down nearly 60 to 70 cents so far in Asia. There's lots of other news brewing as well. We have European gas and power markets, which are continuing to heat up. The IEA's Fatih Birol told CNBC he expects prices to shoot higher in the coming weeks. Beg your pardon, I think he spoke to Bloomberg TV. So that's in our reading list. You can have a look later. Elsewhere, Putin's ruling party is leading in Russia's legislative elections, according to the exit polls. And Justin Trudeau's fate is on the line in Canadian elections underway. So it's election season as well. So we have a lot to discuss on today and chew upon. So let's plunge straight in with Omar, if I may start with you. So as I mentioned, I suspect a lot of downward pressure on oil prices, primarily coming from just, it seems to be a kind of waning risk appetite once again in the financial markets. Do you see prices continuing to skid lower, or do you see any supportive factors at all on the horizon, over the coming days?
Yeah, so I mean, first, just to put things in perspective, last week the market went up. Today there's some selling, Friday there's some selling, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday there was some buying. But apart from that, you just need to look at energy prices. You just need to look at gas prices, which are basically not only high, but so high as to stop chemical plants from operating, so high as to basically get, in the UK, letters from energy companies saying that they're going to increase prices 15 to 30%, the maximum allowed by law, and so high that you're going to start seeing energy switching. So high that coal prices are starting to go up, even though, with all the environmental green stuff that's in Europe, that's kind of, unheard of. Uranium prices, uranium ore are also going straight up. So you can look at it in one of two ways. Either all of energy goes up and oil goes down, which I think is unlikely, or everything's going to go up with a woof kind of thing, which is my kind of preferred interpretation. It's also important to know that when markets never go in a straight line. But I think, we're heading into the fourth quarter. Diesel, distillates, gas oil are basically, market leaders. There's pressures on refinery margins upwards. So all in all, I'm, quite bullish. Not, oil and the rest of the energy complex. I think they support each other, etc. I mean, the Fed stuff is really interesting, but they're not going to do anything because they can't.
Okay.
That's my view.
Having heard you on this program pretty regularly, Omar, I'm not surprised. Okay, so on Omar's point on European gas and power shortages and crisis, I think we can call it, let's bring Charles in. Charles, from your perch in Europe, can you walk us through how you see this gas and power crisis unfolding in the region?
But it's Birol said it will get worse. I mean, it's a very difficult situation. The supply of gas is still under threat. The latest was that even Norway is having some problems maintaining supplies to Europe. Even though Nord Stream 2 is ready to supply gas, there is a process taking place with a lot of pressure to approve it. But approvals may take time. Some say may take 4 months. They're having, in the UK, for example, one of the interconnectors between the UK and France had problems, so they stopped transmitting electricity. All of these things are piling up and keeping prices high, and they will go up higher if no new source of gas comes through over the next few weeks. They will go higher as we go into the winter, and storage levels are at lows, very low. The pressure is prices to go up. So even though today Boris Johnson in the UK said this is a temporary crisis, it could be. I think it's a temporary crisis, but how temporary is temporary? Maybe for the next 3-4 months, and this is having a huge impact at the moment, causing havoc everywhere. Prices are unaffordable. As Omar said, in the UK, 2 fertilizer plants had to close because they couldn't get the gas they needed. It's too expensive.
Yeah, and there's a danger of other industrial production having to shut down as well elsewhere in Europe.
There is a huge danger. Bloomberg is already warning that if this carries on, there are also concerns of blackouts in Europe. There could be blackouts, unheard of. And yet the situation, there is no clear way forward, no clear development that will bring these prices down and bring normality. I think it will last for a few months.
Yeah, it's quite worrying, coming on top of the 1.5 years of COVID that people have been living with already and are absolutely tired and fatigued.
Of course, the problem in Europe is also that Europe has moved too fast into green energy. Yeah. And, during the summer, it was calm weather and wind energy was very much down, forcing the use of more gas. And this fast, it's going to have major implications on energy transition, on renewables, because this fast shift in Europe seems to be hurting Europe now. So they may have to go back and rethink the whole process. With COP26 coming in November, I think there will be a lot of scratching of heads and rethinking about how far can we go? How fast can we go?
Big questions indeed. Talking of shortages, the US and the Gulf region, the US Gulf region has been coming out of one, barely. So Randall, I see that the Gulf offshore production has reached about 1.4 million barrels per day. That's nearly 75% of the capacity is back. I think of the 2.3 million barrels per day or so of the refining capacity that was affected in Louisiana, also it's down to just now about 500,000 barrels per day. Do you sense that the slower than anticipated resumption of facilities after Ida? Do you still think it's a bullish factor for the market, or do you think it's more or less baked into prices now?
Yeah, good morning, Vandana. Good morning, everyone. That's a good question, Vandana. And I think, production is, I think the correct term to use is creeping back, would be the term. It's not rushing back into the market. And I think that has put some downward pressure on oil prices as this oil begins to trickle back into production. As you know, Vandana, the Gulf of Mexico is still a very critical, or I should say essential to US overall production. I believe some 1.8 million barrels of oil per day comes out of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, having said that, the waters in the Gulf of Mexico, what we call off the continental shelf, is in federal territory. And as you remember, if you go back to President Biden's, when he was campaigning, he said that he wanted to reduce exploration and production on state lands, and that includes the Gulf of Mexico. But thus far we have not seen any deliberate moves to curtail permitting and production in the Gulf of Mexico. So it still remains a very good source of crude oil for the US.
And sour crude, which is also equally important, right? Because all the oil that comes from the shale property is all light and sweet. Absolutely
correct. Yeah, and this is what WTI is benchmarked on, right? That's sort of a sweet light oil that comes out of the WTI. I think we're going to see over the next following weeks more and more production come back on stream. As you know, Vandana, we're in the sort of the peak of the hurricane period. There's a couple more storms brewing outside there. So we just don't know what direction it will take, but we got to keep our eyes on it.
Yeah, absolutely. But talking of production shortages, a big looming one was in OPEC, non-OPEC production. Omar, if you were following this, nearly 600,000 to 800,000 barrels per day shortfall in OPEC plus production in August. Of course, depending on who you're listening to, there are slight variations in the surveys of various companies. But Omar, if I may get your thoughts on how worried are you? Do you think this is a problem of OPEC plus basically not ramping enough, but not being able to ramp up enough in the coming months?
I agree. I don't think they are able to. I think the market is, there was a story I read, I think on here saying that, the market's overestimating OPEC's ability to bring oil to market. But I think the way that I like to think about the market right now is that you've been in an uptrend since I can remember, since, April of last year, like a solid, strong uptrend. That's one. Two, you have a lot of basically dislocations, problems. You have massive problems with power, electricity, gas, all forms of energy, right? And one thing I can guarantee you is whatever happens to the minute, details and all the rest of it, when stuff like this happens, as soon as you say to the market, don't panic, it's going to be okay. One thing that's going to happen is this market is going to panic. And I can see it. This is what it's got nothing to do with, the kind of, 1 + 1 = 2 and all this kind of stuff. It's basically all hell is breaking loose. Yeah. Can you imagine blackouts? Can you imagine fertilizer companies shutting down? Can you imagine basically that these issues are coming to the fore and everybody seems to have, head in the ground, ostrich position. And what they're going to say is, like Boris Johnson, don't panic. And I guarantee you, they'll panic. The market's going to panic. You just wait.
Yeah. And in fact, exactly as Charles was saying, this is going to be a long-term crisis with long-term repercussions also over Europe's transition. So, Charles, do you think the region is ready to ask itself some tough questions? Can you just overnight, is it a pragmatic, practical, sensible thing to do, to just overnight close down coal and say goodbye to oil and gas, and suddenly everything with the flick of a switch becomes green? So my question to you is, do you think the region is ready to have some honest debate about this, in COP26 or outside? It really doesn't matter, but is it ready to have that debate?
I'm not so sure, because only a few days ago, Frans Timmermans of the European Commission, Vice President, he said, this crisis shows that we have to move even faster into energy transition. He said, if we had more renewables, we wouldn't be in this situation now, which I find it very strange. I mean, it's a very strange statement. And also,
that makes two of us.
Last week, an EU Mediterranean countries meeting, a summit, And it agreed a huge list of actions to move faster towards renewable energy. So, but I think COP26 will be a time to reflect, I'm sure. On the other hand, COP26 may be overshadowed by the rift between the United States and China. So they don't see eye to eye. United States is calling on China to take serious action for climate change. China is not responding. And that may overshadow the business of COP26 next month. So I'm not so sure. I think I'm with the European Commission not seeing the problem, believing that the way forward is more renewables. I am not sure which way it's going to go. On the other hand, reality is going to hit, and hopefully by next month we will see a bit of rethinking about the pace of change, about reliance on gas maybe, or whatever, but they are not. It's not happening. Even here in the Netherlands, where I am, the government has ruled out bringing back Groningen. Groningen was a big gas field that was supplying Europe for a long time, and it caused problems because of subsidence and seismic problems. And they shut it down. It can still produce gas, but they are not thinking of doing anything about it as a result of this. So it's I think there is a view that this is going to be temporary and we will ride it out. But if it carries on for a bit longer, well, God knows.
Yeah, more crisis, I suppose. Randall, at least in the US, a fast pace of transition is at least not a danger in the US. Americans have been flying, driving, using oil almost on a par with 2019 levels this summer. And last week we saw the retail sales data from the US in August was also very, very strong. So it seems like people are buying, though it's pivoting from goods to services, but nonetheless, people are buying. And first of all, how do you sense the mood in the US in terms of mobility and in terms of people's willingness and ability to continue spending? Because I suppose that'll be one of the major factors for the Fed as well, and how it translates into inflation.
Sure. So Vandana, I think what is happening is that, there was a lot of talk about pent-up demand. And from what I've read, there's an estimated $2 trillion in pent-up demand sitting there. So I think, I think retailers have anticipated that, the business environment has anticipated that. So I think what we're seeing is basically inevitable as we transition out of the sort of downside and get into recovery. You're going to see more and more retail activity. And you're correct, the US is the largest consumer of gasoline in the world. In 2019, they consumed an approximate 420 million gallons of fuel. So look like that trend will continue. And, as the economy begins to open more and more, you're going to see more mobility and more consumption. Now, obviously schools have reopened. My both kids are back in school. So that again means more mobility. The thing that has not picked up really is in two sectors: international flights, and the cruise industry. So again, there's a lot of pent-up demand in those two sectors. And I suspect, as probably by the end of fourth quarter, look out for more business in these two sectors.
I would agree with you about pent-up demand in the international air travel. I know for one, I'm just dying to go meet my parents in India. I'm a little bit skeptical about the pent-up demand in cruise industry. Maybe that's me, but the number of horror stories that are circulating from people who took some of the cruises that resumed, I believe it was always a little bit of a niche travel. But again, cruises are not going to have that much impact on oil demand. But I agree with you. I think international travel so far is very, very subdued. And frankly, personally, I don't see it starting up anytime soon. At this point, let's bring in our guests today and have the survey question. Let's get their views on the gas and power crisis in Europe. Okay, so the alarm bells are ringing louder each day for the unfolding gas and power crisis in Europe. We'd love to know, how much impact do you think the gas shortages and price spikes will have on oil? Your choices are considerable impact. We could see crude shoot above $80. I know what Omar is going to answer to that. Or moderate impact, as there are limits to fuel substitution. Or negligible impact, as supply will respond to prices. And as Charles mentioned, there's the Nord Stream 2 supply, which is waiting to come on stream as well. So please vote your answer. And let's get back to Omar while we collect the responses. Omar, I believe you would be looking at speculative positions of traders in crude futures or other gas product futures and gas futures, especially at the crude futures contracts. To my mind, speculators have been tinkering at the margins in recent weeks. They, just maybe unwilling to take a major bearish or bullish bets on prices. Do you think with this unfolding gas crisis and potential knock-on effect on oil, do you think we might see more speculative length coming into crude or refined product futures in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah, I think basically, if you look at the market, people don't like or can't afford to not do anything because that's their job. So they either have to be long or short. And with the problems the market's having, with the dislocations, with all that kind of stuff, everybody's tried to throw the kitchen sink at this market. So every time we've said market will go up since I don't know when, it's been either COVID or Iran, or there's definitely going to be a deal, or the Chinese will release I don't know what. And all they've done is basically, people tend to look at the stuff that's in front of their faces, and they kind of tend to ignore stuff that's been going on for 10, 15 years. The issues with oil and with gas and with energy in general hasn't happened, this week or last week. It's happened basically, over the last 10 years plus, because of lack of investment, because people want to say that we're going to stop cars in 2030 or 2025 or whatever it is that they say, because it makes political sense. So this kind of, lack of investment, this kind of, these big ideas that are not so, sexy right now, that's the reason the market is where it is now. So yes, I do think basically people will go long oil, whether it be products or crude. And I think basically, when Randall says there's $2 trillion worth of pent-up demand, what would you do? Be basically long or short and don't panic. So, everything I've heard today is basically, on the bullish side. So, and the bearish side is what? It's going to take a while, and, let's see. And maybe so Nord Stream 2, for example, it's already done, but Germany refuses to sign off on the license. And they see energy prices where they are, and they see them going higher. So why is that? That's quite interesting. So that's, again, a political decision. I think basically the US, Europe, they don't mind, for now, higher energy prices. Maybe that serves the green agenda, maybe, I don't know. But at the end of the day, everything that I see points to a market that's, panicky. And I don't think there's a savior out there. I don't think OPEC will save it. I don't think the US will save it. And I don't think the Chinese will save it. I think basically the only thing that'll save it is you drive prices high enough to make people scream. And then maybe you see a demand response. But until then, telling people don't worry and it's transitory and, all this kind of stuff just is like a red flag to a bull. Don't worry. That's my view.
Yeah. Related to the survey question, Charles, to what extent, let me backtrack. I already see reports of fertilizer factories and some industries planning to or even starting to shut shop because of the shortage. To what extent do you think substitution is possible? Or if things come to a breaking point, we probably just see more supply chain issues and shortages basically filtering through to other products. So power, definitely, yes. But a lot of other industries that depend on gas and electricity as well.
Well, substitution is very difficult. In Europe, in a way, when it comes to power, they are now going back to coal. So a lot of the coal-fired plants that were shut down can be brought back into operation in a short length of time. So that may be happening, but substitution with oil, I don't see that happening. It's a long-term process, but also, where we shouldn't look at this as something that has come and it will stay. I also believe it's a temporary, it's like a spike that may last for a few months. By the end of the year, I see this subsiding. I mean, in Europe, for example, Nord Stream 2 will definitely come back. Norway will reinstate supplies, and things will come down. So it will go. I believe it will go away, and I don't see Europe or the United States shifting away from their green agenda just because of this little problem at the moment. They don't see that as a long-term problem. So the green agenda stays. And going back to what Omar was saying, as a result of that, the spending of most of the international oil companies has gone down dramatically. I mean, if you compare spending now to 5-6 years ago, it's down by 60%. That is a huge reduction, and it's happening. And they have no plans to increase spending dramatically over the next year or two. So, because there is this uncertainty about the future, if you invest in a project now, and by 2030 everything goes down because Europe and the United States are driving the green agenda, they will be left with a lot of white elephants in their hands, a lot of plant with no buyers. So that uncertainty, I don't see it going away. So as a result, the spending, increased spending and more production, I'm not absolutely sure. I think it will take
Interesting. Let's have the survey results and give the last word to Randall. And Randall, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what you expect from the Fed this week. So our results are considerable impact on crude, about less than a third. Moderate impact is what the majority of our viewers today think. And negligible impact, not that many. So moderate impact to considerable impact is what our guests think today. Randall, your final word on the Fed and what impact do you see on whatever comes out of Mr. Powell's mouth on the markets?
Right. So I think the article says it nicely. The Fed is not about to rock the boat at this point in time. Obviously, we got to look at the data, right? We got to look at inflation and we got to look at unemployment. Those are the two key factors that the Fed is going to look at before they make any decision to taper or not. Let's not forget it was, $120 billion per month of buying assets, in the form of treasury bills, treasury notes, mortgage-backed certificates. So, I don't expect a whole lot. I expect the Fed to be more dovish than hawkish in their decisions. But I do expect that at the end of the year, probably the end of Q4, you're going to see a more definitive announcement from the Fed to begin tapering. I think it's inevitable that they need to taper. There's just so much liquidity in the system already. And, we need to soak up some of that liquidity because that in itself has an impact on inflation, apart from the broken supply chains, and apart from the amount of stimulus that was pumped into the economy. We need to soak up, some of that liquidity.
So that seems a foregone conclusion almost that Q4 tapering is coming. I suppose what the markets will be waiting to see is whether the Fed actually gives a definitive timeline this week or not. So with that, we'll close this session. Thank you very, very much to my three guests, Charles, Omar, and Randall. Thank you very much for your time. And thank you to everyone who participated. We'll see you same time, same place tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.
Bye, everybody.